Por ti, para ti. Por versus para. Hello, everyone. In today's lesson, we're going to learn when to use por and when to use para. So let's begin. So we're going to begin with the uses of por. The first use is when we want to give the object or goal of a specific action. So for example, if I say, vine por usted a las 8, the equivalent in English, it will be, I came by for you at 8. And the object or the goal I came by is for you. So in this next example, we're going to see another equivalent of the word por in English when we're talking about the object or goal of an action. So in the sentence, los estudiantes salieron por más pinturas para los carteles. The students went to get more paint for the posters. So in this example, por is the equivalent of to get, or basically to get is the equivalent of por. And in this case, the goal or the object of the students to go out is finding more paint. So our next example, cancelamos el proyecto por falta de fondos. We canceled the project because of a lack of funds. So in this case, the equivalent of por in English is because of. The reason we canceled the project was because of a lack of funds. So let's take a look at our next example. ¿Lo hiciste por mí? Did you do it for me? So in this case, for is the equivalent of por because it means on my behalf. So when we talk about por as the goal or objective, which is the same thing, or object of an action, there are several meanings in English. The first one, because of. The second one could be also for. The third one, on behalf. And the last one is to get. So the second use of por is when it means in exchange for. So for example, ¿querías ese libro por $5? Do you want that book for $5? In this case, I'm exchanging the value of the money for the book. So the next use of por is when we want to indicate an amount of time or the part of day an event or action takes place. And is the equivalent in English of for or during. So for example, fuimos a visitar a mis primos por una semana, which means we went to visit my cousins for a week. So that for indicates the amount of time or length of time I spent visiting my cousins. Now, the for use of por is to indicate motion and is the equivalent of by, along, or around. So, for example, pasé por tu casa esta mañana y no estabas. I went by your house this morning, but you were not there. So, the equivalent of por is by because it indicates motion. So, the last use of por is with the expression to be about to do something. To express that in Spanish we use estar plus the verb in infinitivo. So, for instance, if I say estábamos por solucionar el problema, the equivalent in English will be we were about to solve the problem. So remember, every time you want to say to be about to do something, you need to use the expression estar por. Okay, so now let's take a look at a couple of idiomatic expressions which require the use of por. Por ahí or por allí, which means around there. Por ahora, for now. Por cierto, by the way. Por Dios, for God's sake. Por eso, that's why. Por fin, finally. Por lo general, in general. Por lo visto, apparently. Por poco, almost. Por si acaso, just in case. Por supuesto, of course. Por último, finally. Okay, so now let's take a look at the uses of para. So just like por, para has also several meanings. So the first meaning is when we want to indicate purpose of an object, event, or one's studies. So, for example, la pintura era para hacer los carteles. The paint was for making the posters. So in this case, what I'm trying to say is that the purpose of the painting was for making the posters. So let's take a look at another example of the use of purpose. Organizaban una manifestación para protestar la decisión del juez. They were organizing a demonstration to protest the judge's decision. So in this case, para is the equivalent of to, because to represents the purpose of the demonstration, which was to protest the decision. Let's take a look at another example that indicates a different meaning of the word para in English in the context of purpose. Carmen estudió para abogada. Carmen studied to become a lawyer. In this case, the word to become means in order to. So in English, when you want to express in order to do something, you use the word para in Spanish. So basically, when we want to talk about the purpose of the event or object, then the equivalent in English will be for, to, or in order to. So the second use of the word para is when we want to make comparisons in qualities or perspectives with others, whether these comparisons are stated or implicit. So for example, para ser conservador, tenía la mente abierta. So the equivalent in English will be, for a conservative, he had an open mind. And the word para is the equivalent of for because we're comparing the qualities of being a conservative. So the third use of para is when we want to express time limits, deadlines, or expected time, and is usually the equivalent of by and for in English. But especially when we want to say when something is due. So for example, ¿para cuándo es la tarea? The equivalent in English will be when is the homework due? And para is the equivalent of due. So let's take a look at another example. Pensaba hacer la tarea para el lunes. I was thinking to do the homework by Monday. So notice that when in English you use the past progressive, I was thinking, in Spanish you need the imperfect, pensaba. And now, the equivalent of para is by in this context, because I'm giving the deadline of when I will have expected to finish my homework. So, let's take a look at another example. Hablaban de otra manifestación para la primavera. They were talking about another manifestation for spring. So in this case, because spring is my deadline or my expected time, then I use para, and the equivalent is for. So the fourth use of para is when we want to talk destination as a place or a recipient. So for example, este informe es para usted. This report is for you. So, because you are the intended recipient, then we use para. Okay, so now let's take a look at the differences between por and para in general. So every time you want to express what reason or what goal is the action or event or the object, then you use por. But every time you want to express for what purpose, then you use para. So for example, ¿por qué no se defendió? Why or for what reason didn't he or she defend herself? Then I can say, no se defendió porque estaba sola. She didn't defend herself because she was alone. Now in the second example, ¿para qué se defendió? So in this case, the meaning will be, for what purpose did she or he defend him or herself? In this case, let's do she. So then the answer will be, se defendió para aclarar las cosas. She defended herself to clarify things. And in this case, the word para means to. And that's it for today.